The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler, December 1st, St. Edmund Campion. The father of the Blessed, whose name was also Edmund Campion, had a shop. He was a book dealer in London. Both he and his wife were Catholics until the time of Queen Elizabeth. Edmund was born around 1540. He was an extraordinarily intelligent boy. At the age of 15, he was awarded a scholarship to St. John's College, Oxford, which Sir Thomas White had just founded. 2 years later, Edmund joined the Society of Young Students. He soon gained a reputation as a brilliant orator and was chosen to speak at the funeral of Lady Amy Dudley, Robsart, at the funeral of Sir Thomas White, and before Queen Elizabeth when she visited the university in 1566. 13 years earlier, when he was at the London Free School, he had been chosen to deliver the address of welcome to Elizabeth's predecessor. The young man's talent and personality won him the goodwill and patronage of the Queen, Cecil, and Leicester. To the latter, Edmund dedicated his History of Ireland. Cecil later called him one of the diamonds of England. Edmund took the oath of allegiance. Although the reading of the Holy Fathers broke his faith in Protestantism, he was convinced by Dr. Cheney, Bishop of Gloucester, and received the diaconate of the Anglican Church. Dr. Gregory Martin, of whom he was a very good friend, wrote to him from Rome, warning him against ambition. Indeed, Edmund was extraordinarily popular in Oxford and had a group of personal disciples, more or less like the group that Newman was to have 250 years later. But the fact that he had received orders in a church about which he had many doubts began to trouble his mind and conscience. In 1569, his term as prefect of young men at the university came to an end. On the other hand, as the society that had supported him during his studies was reluctant because of his papist tendencies, Edmund left for Berlin, where efforts were being made to revive the university. While there, he wrote a brief history of the country. On leaving Oxford, Campion was filled with remorse of conscience and anguish of spirit for having accepted Anglican orders and made no effort to conceal it. Thus, after the publication of St. Pius, the bull against Elizabeth, his attitude aroused dangerous suspicions. In 1571, Campion returned to England in disguise, attended the trial of Blessed John Story at Westminster Hall, and then moved on to Douai. On the way, he was arrested for not carrying a passport, but managed to bribe the guards by giving them money and leaving them his luggage. One of the first things he did in Douai was to write a very brave letter to Dr. Cheney, who was inclined to Catholicism. Campion graduated in theology and received the subdiaconate at Douai. In 1573, he moved to Rome and entered the Society of Jesus. Since the English province did not yet exist, he was sent to Bohemia. He made his novitiate in Brno and went to teach at the Bohemian College. In view of the success with which the Jesuits worked among the Protestants in Germany, Bohemia, and Poland, Dr. Allen persuaded Gregory XIII to send some of them to England. Edmund Campion and Robert Persons were chosen to inaugurate the new mission. On the eve of Father Campion's departure from Prague, one of the fathers, moved by an irresistible impulse, wrote on the door of the Blessed's room the following: Father Edmund Campion, Martyr. Father Campion left Rome in the spring of 1580. Blessed Rudolf Sherwin described very vividly in a letter to Rudolf Bickley the vicissitudes of the journey. When they arrived in Geneva, which was one of the strongholds of Protestantism, Campion passed himself off as an Irish servant named Patrick. It seems that all the members of the party behaved with that somewhat unbridled gaiety that leads serious people to imagine that all Englishmen are mad. Shortly before leaving Geneva, after having quarreled with Beza, Campion confronted a Protestant minister and made a fool of the poor devil in front of all his co-religionists. Persons left St. Omer for England disguised as a soldier, as if returning from the Netherlands. Campion pretended to be a jewel merchant. His servant was the curate brother Rudolf Emerson. Not all Catholics received the Jesuits well, for many feared that the arrival of the first members of the terrible Society of Jesus would bring new dangers upon them. The two Jesuits had to swear that their mission was purely apostolic, that they had come simply to take care of religion and to fight for souls, and that they had neither knowledge nor pretensions in matters of politics. The government soon learned of their arrival, so that the two Jesuits had to leave London. Campion worked in Berkshire, Oxfordshire, and Northamptonshire, where he converted some important people. In a letter to Father General, he said, "Every day I travel through a part of the region. The harvest is wonderfully abundant. I cannot long escape the hands of persecutors. I find my disguises perfectly ridiculous. I frequently change my disguise and my name. Sometimes I have read letters announcing that Campion has been arrested. That news causes such an uproar in the places where I go that I hear of nothing else. This climate of fear in which I live has finally cured me of fear." Father Campion met Father Persons in London, where the persecution was particularly tenacious. He then went to Lancashire, where he preached almost daily with great success. Spies followed him closely, and on several occasions he nearly fell into their hands. 50 years later, those who had heard his sermons still remembered them. At that time, Campion wrote a work in Latin, which he called the 10 Reasons, for in it he set forth the 10 arguments by which he was ready to demonstrate to the most learned Protestants the falsity of his doctrine. Naturally, it was very difficult to give that work to the press. Nevertheless, after all, it was secretly printed in the house of Mrs. Cecilia Stoner in Stonor Park, Berkshire. On June 27, 1581, 400 copies of the work appeared on the pews of the church at Oxford University. This, as was to be expected, caused a major scandal, and the persecutors redoubled their efforts to capture the author. They succeeded 3 weeks later. After the publication of the 10 Reasons, Father Campion judged it prudent to retire to Norfolk. On the way, he stopped at Lyford, at Mrs. Yates' house. On Sunday, July 16th, about 40 people came to hear him preach during Mass. One of them was a spy. In the course of the next 12 hours, the house was searched 3 times. The persecutors finally discovered Father Campion and 2 other priests hidden in a niche above the large entrance door. They were immediately taken to the Tower of London. The guards manacled them from Colnbrook and placed on the back of the Blessed a sign reading, "Campion, the seditious Jesuit." After 3 days of torture, the martyr was interrogated by the Earls of Bedford and Leicester, according to some, also by the Queen, who tried to bribe him to apostatize. When this and other attempts of the same kind failed, he was tortured on the rack. Shortly after, several persons were arrested in whose house Father Campion had been. Although the government had found out the names of those accomplices through another channel, it spread the false news that the martyr had denounced them. Before he could recover from the torture, Father Campion was forced to appear 4 times before various Protestant prelates. The martyr answered their questions, objections, and insults with agility and great tact. Afterwards, he was again tortured on the rack with such violence that the next day, when asked how he felt, he replied, "I cannot feel bad, since I do not even feel." As the persecutors could find no valid reason to condemn him, they falsely accused him, together with Rudolph Sherwin, Thomas Cottam, Luke Kirby, and others, of having projected in Rome and Rheims a revolution in England, and of having returned to the country to provoke it. The trial took place at Westminster Hall on November 14th. When the judges ordered him to swear to tell the truth, the blessed man was so weak that he could not even move his arms. Then one of his companions kissed his hand and helped him to raise it. Campion conducted his defense and that of his companions with the greatest skill. He protested their loyalty to the Queen, demolished the accusations, demonstrated the bad faith of the witnesses, and proved clearly that the true motive on which they were tried was religion. The jury found them guilty, but not without first deliberating for an hour. After hearing the sentence of death, the blessed man addressed the judges. "In condemning us, you have condemned all your ancestors, and for us to have been condemned together with all the illustrious men, not only of England, but of the whole world, who were condemned by you, outcast descendants of those ancestors, is a reason for joy and glory. God lives, posterity will speak. The judgment of both of us will not be subject to sale as that of those who have just condemned us to death." Campion's sister went to see him with a message from Hopton, offering him a pingy profit in exchange for apostasy. Eliot, the traitor who had betrayed him and testified against him, who now feared for his life, also came to visit him. The Blessed generously forgave him and gave him a letter of recommendation to a nobleman in Germany, where he could live in peace. The 10th of December was a rainy and sad day. Campion, Sherwin, and Bryant were led together to Tyburn, where they were executed with the customary luxury of barbarism. On the scaffold, Father Campion refused for the last time to give his opinion on the Pope's bull against Elizabeth, and prayed publicly for "your Queen and my Queen, to whom I wish a long and prosperous reign." A few drops of the blood of that admirable, subtle, precise, and kindly man fell on a young nobleman named Henry Walpole, who was present. Walpole entered the Society of Jesus, died a martyr, and is beatified. Not only the Society of Jesus, but also the dioceses of Northampton, Portsmouth, Brno, and Prague celebrate the feast of Blessed Edmund Campion.